Welcome to the Impact Effect podcast. I've got an amazing guest, and woo, you are in for a treat. There's going to be so much information, jam-packed, talking about life, experiences, and we're just going to dive in. So please help me welcome Rob Farmer.
Hi, Jim. Nice to be here.
Let's go. Let's go.
Great, let's do it.
As you know, Impact Effect podcast, fashion. First question, how do you show up in the world and provide impact today?
I love this. The way that I think of impact, and this is not a new analogy, but I think about this almost every day, is a pebble in the water. And I'm the pebble, and the water makes waves. It can make great, big, splashy, messy, nasty waves, or it can make small, little flowing waves that go very, very far. And every day I struggle to make the right kind of wave for the right kind of situation. So that's how I think about impact. But if I'm the pebble I want to be is a topic I'm embracing and I've been working on for a long time, which is empathy, understanding people. But more than just understanding people, what I like to call, and I've been trained on, tactical empathy, taking that understanding of other people and using it. It's one thing to understand other people, it's another thing altogether to take your knowledge of them and make money, improve a brand, my business, making cars, whatever. So tactical empathy, I'm a pebble making waves, big and small.
Let's go. What a picture to paint.
I think I borrowed it from someone. I'm not the first person that's used that analogy, but
I've never heard it. So
oh, really?
I've
Okay.
never heard
Yeah.
that before. And at first I was using logic in business. I'm like, okay, he's talking about pebble. Is he talking about goals and rocks and, big rocks and small rocks? And you weren't. You were talking about that little piece of impact that you can make
Yep.
that has all those ripples.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. So you talked about cars. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now for work, how you're impacting that way.
Yep.
And then let's jump into life because
Okay,
that's
great.
really what we're here.
Yeah, so I work for Nissan. I am a career market researcher. It's a really, really fun job. I've had the great privilege of working in 5 different countries for a couple different car companies. And I study consumers all day long and figure out what makes them tick and then try to get Nissan to respond accordingly. What's fascinating about it right now is the car business, the world really, is under so much disruption. So we're migrating toward very, very expensive electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles. Customers buying cars are confused. Do I get a gas vehicle? Do I get a hybrid? Do I get a electric vehicle? So going through all of those, both industrial disruptions as well as kind of consumer behavior disruptions, it's my job to sort of bridge those two gaps.
Wow.
So it's really, really fun. It's really, really interesting. But there's another disruption, I like to call it the twin disruptions, that we're going through, which is just data. So traditionally, my business has been a survey data, qualitative focus groups, collecting information from consumers about what they want. Now, all of this is moving towards, yes, social media, but now also AI, and trying to understand how to use AI to make an impact in a company, to make an impact with a customer. It's really, really interesting. I didn't know my job was easy in 2019, but it was compared to where it is today.
Wow.
So navigating these twins disruptions is how I spend most of my working days.
Your role, you're talking about consumer behavior,
Yep.
data analysis, understanding trends, people. What does that look like? So are you working on a project?
Yep.
You pull in all this data around this subset category of demographics like age, race, geographic location, how many vehicles they bought previously, what types of vehicles. Are you trying to acquire as much information about specific data points and people to then create a marketing plan for them to purchase it? Walk me through because I think there's something really cool here, and I've got a couple questions already brewing for you.
Okay. The answer to your question is yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
So let me answer it with an example. Going back a couple of years, and this is kind of a very public example, lots of companies are working on this, so I'm not revealing any secrets here. It became clear that men were adopting electric vehicles at a faster rate than women. And this kind of surprised us as a business. We were looking at it a number of different ways and started asking, why is that the case? And so, of course, first I started asking my wife, my daughter, the other women in my life. And then we started asking customers about it in a more formal way. And what became very clear very quickly is women don't take on as much risk as men. If you look at motorcycle behavior, life insurance actuarial tables, men are, for lots of complicated reasons, more likely to take on more risk. And when you talk to females about electric vehicles, they will eventually get to the point where they're talking about the risk. What's going to happen to my electric bill? How do I plug it in? Am I safe at a charging station? What's it going to cost? Is it going to be inconvenient? And in this case, and so much of what happened with electric vehicles in this country was related to Mr. Musk and Tesla. And Teslas were cool and Teslas went fast. There was also an element of this which was kids were really, really interested in technology and electric vehicles. So electric vehicles kind of became this like dad and the kids thing that they could talk about and that they could, have some curiosity with. And if they had a level of income where they could afford a Tesla, then that became kind of I don't want to say a toy, but a certain kind of new object to communicate around. So
I never would have thought about it like that, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not in the industry. You see something happen, like the Teslas come out, they blow up.
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention to, oh, that was a male, that was a female that drove by, that was a male, 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 that was a family. So it's so interesting, your perspective, when you focus and key on a piece of data or a subset category of information that's extremely important
Right.
to the growth of that model, the growth of that business, that, department, that sector.
Yeah.
Interesting. What other information have you kind of found out that's been really kind of interesting, or the average person wouldn't just, acquire?
It's really interesting, and you can go in any different direction with that. We're spending a lot of time right now studying what's happening with, of course, tariffs. Of course, there's definitely a feeling that electric vehicles are declining a little bit in the short term. So what does that mean? What are the patterns of behavior that will encourage people to buy a hybrid vehicle versus a gasoline vehicle, what we call ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles? And it has a lot to do with risk tolerance and what you're willing to take on. It has a lot to do with value and money. Cars have gotten a lot more expensive in the last few years. So what's happening to the value segment? More people are buying used cars. There's more business models emerging, things like Carvana, car gurus. There's multiple different models out there. But yeah, the car industry is definitely an industry under attack. And the way that you understand that is to talk to customers and figure out what they need and figure out what they want. It's a definite signal to pull you forward in a big industrial business like the one I work in.
Yeah, it's such a massive industry, so much revenue, so many employees, economic stimulus, right? Like people moving around the country and,
Yep.
all the things, because it's transportation, it's vehicles, it's high ticket, it's expensive. A lot of it's luxury, a lot of it's, economical, like what makes sense. And there's so many subset categories, but you are selling a product to every single category.
Yes.
And that's interesting.
Yes.
From just a sales perspective, from a marketing perspective, from
Yeah.
an entrepreneurial perspective, and a
Absolutely.
business owner perspective, and an executive level, and an entry level employee. Like, there's so many factors and pieces that go into that, because production can ramp up, but if you don't have the data, you don't have the marketing, you don't have the analysis, and no one buys it, now there's layoffs,
Yes,
right? We've
exactly.
seen that.
Exactly.
We've experienced that.
Yes.
So it's just, there's so much impact that stems from a massive organization like Nissan, that really is derived from the data and analysis that you're doing day to
Absolutely.
day with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing also too to think about there is we actually aren't in every category. And not all car companies are. I'll
Okay.
give you one kind of silly example. You go back to the 1980s, and do you remember how many different minivans there were in the world? And then there was a big, backlash against minivans. And now there's very few companies that are competing in that minivan space. And
Interesting.
Nissan's had some interest in that space and decided to get out. So have other car companies. So part of my job is trying to find those white space opportunities for the company to get into or not get into. I'll give you another really fun example that might make my work more crystal to everyone, which is, believe it or not, puppies. Dogs are huge. And based on the work that I've done, something happened during COVID where people were more isolated and they wanted to bond, and there weren't other people around.
Totally.
So we got dogs. And one of the things that really shocked me a couple years ago was, particularly with some of our larger SUVs, is the super high. Like in one case, it was 100%. Every single owner of this kind of vehicle had a dog.
Wow.
And we were like, what's going on here? And basically, to make a long story short, you got a dog. Dog wants to go for walks. Dog becomes part of the family. I think about like McDonald's has the dog bones that they give to you in the drive-thru and this kind of stuff. So dogs are a part of people's lives now, increasingly in a way they weren't even 4 years ago. So what's the opportunity space there? Is it a marketing message? And we've been experimenting with some marketing messages around dogs. Is it a space and size and flexibility of the vehicle? Also, safety, dog harnesses, doggy car seats. People worry about the safety of their dogs when they put their dogs in the car. So that's been another space we've been looking at. Do we need to make a bigger play in those kind of spaces? And that's a crowded space. Amazon's got pet accessories, and here in Nashville, Mars Pet Care is a big employer. So they're looking at dogs and transportation. And of course, PetSense and TSC's got PetSense, and it's a busy category. So, is it appropriate for us to go there? We're there a little bit now, and do we want to go more? We're looking at that. So,
Cool.
yeah,
Cool. All right, let's jump into something you said earlier: tactical empathy.
Yes,
Tactical empathy. Why is that on your heart? Why are you researching it? Why are you spending so much time around it?
Yeah, so I guess it all started. I spent 15 years living abroad in several different countries, and
Did everybody just hear that though? 15 years, not a year, not went over there for college. 15 years.
Yes,
okay. I just want to make that a point.
Well, and it's an important point because I went through a definite phase of reverse culture shock. And I've always been someone, going all the way back to my childhood, who definitely wants to seek to understand other people. My father was one of 9 children.
Wow.
And so I grew up in an extended family where there were, I don't even know how many cousins I have. I don't know if I could even count them. And it was this big just ecosystem community, really. And I had to learn at an early age how to navigate all of that. And so it served me very well to work in big corporate environments, actually. But then when I moved overseas, I don't know. You have to take your cues from the culture that you're in. Mm-hmm. And when I got back to America, and also it was also a move to Nashville, which I'd never lived in before, so Nashville's another country too.
Yeah, of course. Coming from Boston, it's drastically different.
Yeah, for me it was coming from Michigan, but it's different. And I was sort of struggling with all that. And it became clear to me that just understanding people and just having empathy for other people wasn't enough. I'd fallen into a lot of people-pleasing tendencies where I just, like, even today, Jim, on the way here, I was like, oh, God, how can I better serve Jim and get him more hits and all this kind of stuff. And I had to say to myself, Rob, slow down. You're there to bring your value and work with Jim on the value that collectively can bring. But I have to harness myself and make sure that I'm bringing value to the company, the business plan, the proposal, whatever it is I'm working on. And so once I kind of realized this, I started getting some coaches. And I did a lot of work with I'll give a shout out to Black Swan Group and Chris Voss. And I went to one of their seminars and I did some private coaching with them. And that really kind of unlocked a lot of understanding for me, which was really, really great. So would you like to do an exercise today?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So I want you to think about something that you're passionate about.
Okay.
Okay. So just put it in your head. And then I'm going to ask you one specific question and then a bunch of follow-ups. And let's see where this goes. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. So tell me what you're passionate about.
Being a dad.
A dad?
Yep. I love it. It's amazing. There was a point in my life where I never thought I was going to become a dad. There was a point in my life where I was just very aware of the level of immaturity I was living with. So it was a long distance goal for me, and it happened a lot quicker. It happened beautifully and perfectly, and I'm just really excited. I'm really excited to navigate those milestones and show up and be there for my children.
Sounds like it's important to you.
It is very important, very important. Oftentimes I wake up and I think about how can I elevate my children? How can I elevate my wife today? We had a podcast guest, Tammy Fitzpatrick, who said that's what she's done over the years and years and years, and it's made her such a great mom and a wife, and that really impacted me.
All right. I'll stop there. But the purpose of this exercise, first of all, thank you for sharing all that. That's really, really powerful.
You get me just sunken into my heart right there. I can hear my voice change too a little bit.
But that's the point, okay? And if you look at when you're, and again,
Yeah.
Black Swan was started on the premise of getting hostages out of crisis situations, okay? That's not anything like what we're doing here, but it's based on me getting information out of you. I barely said anything to you. All right, and there's but you gave me all this stuff. I found out more about you in that 30 seconds or whatever it was than I knew about you before I walked in the door.
Totally.
And what's important to you and what you're working on, what you worked on yesterday, where you're going, where you've been. You gave me all of that, and I gave you nothing. All right. So one of the problems I have in my life and my work is I have a tendency to be like, tell me about this, tell me about that. Why'd you do that? Why'd you feel that way? No, you're wrong. You're wrong. And all of that just gets you off base with everybody.
True.
And so really, really practicing those techniques has been really kind of life-changing for me. I use them on my kids, use them with my wife. Shh, don't tell her. I use them with my coworkers. Yeah, everywhere. You can even use them, at hotels to get upgrades and all kinds of crazy stuff. But again, and you're doing nothing. You're giving nothing of yourself away, and you're getting everything out of the other person. Very powerful.
Is it something where you do that as a mechanism so you don't have to share sometimes? There's a point in my life where I would incur questions and curiosity so no one would ask me those deep questions. So I'm just curious if you've ever fell into kind of like utilizing that approach as a protection mechanism against yourself, because I have. I've been very aware about it.
I have too, but with me, it's more about I have a tendency to be not focused and overshare. There have been elements where I've used it as a self-protection kind of mechanism.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I totally feel that.
But that's usually not the rabbit hole that I fall into. Yeah. So, but yeah, you can use it for that.
With the empathy piece, when does it become harmful to you? So what I mean by that is I've been empathetic, and someone was robbing me the whole time.
Yep.
And consecutively, consistently, financially, mindset-wise, emotion, making me feel that I wasn't equipped enough to advise, even though it was my company and I was paying that person.
Yes.
So I've experienced it on all different levels. Can you share or tell us about some of the scenarios you might have faced being super empathetic or maybe even not enough?
Yeah. So I would say what I just described works in most of life's situations. I would venture to guess 90%
Yeah, pretty
of the
high.
cases.
Yeah.
It's a high percentage, but those 10% exceptions can drive you crazy if you're not really, really careful. And I ran into a couple of situations in my life where none of this was working. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought I was a problem. I thought I was creating all of this drama. And I did what a lot of people do when they run into these kind of conflicts in life. I went to Dr. YouTube. Are you familiar with Dr. YouTube?
YouTube University, baby.
YouTube University. And as it turns out, I kind of jokingly say, but it's not really joking. I think between YouTube and Instagram and Amazon, Netflix too, they understand me more than any individual human. And on the one hand, that scares the death out of me. But on the other hand, it also brings me a lot of advantages.
Yeah.
And here's an example of one of those advantages. I thought when I was working with some of these difficult people having these difficult interactions, I thought I was dealing with someone with a split personality disorder. It was that bad. And I'm sure you felt that way too.
Totally.
And so Dr. YouTube kindly informed me, no, that's not what's going on. You might be dealing with someone with narcissistic personality disorder. And I'd heard that word before, but I didn't really know what it meant. I had some kind of surface level feelings about it. And so then I really, really started studying it. I started working with some coaches. I started working with some therapists, psychological experts to help me understand this person and how to deal with that person. So,
how do you define narcissism or a narcissist?
yeah. Well, first of all, let me say, I really shouldn't define it because I'm not certified. It is a psychiatric disorder.
Yeah.
And there's so much information on it now. Just in the last couple of years, this has exploded in terms of just the public's awareness of it. And nowadays, you can go to Dr. YouTube, and there's legal coaches, there's doctor coaches, there's a Christian narcissist. I mean, all over the place. It's totally fragmented, like any mature market starts to do. Again, there's my market research side talking. But for me, I went to the licensed practitioners and said, I've got this problem and here's the situation. And pretty quickly they can come back and they say, yes, they meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, which is what the label is. So don't diagnose it yourself with Dr. YouTube. Get the professionals and have them help you. But then once you can get to that point, they can really help you understand the techniques, understand the patterns, and then give you helpful ways of coping. And there are very specific patterns to look for. There are very specific things to understand, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of those.
There is, what comes to my mind is a scenario and situation where I finally realized after 3 years working for a company that I was set up to fail.
Yep.
When you actually get out of it and look back from a 30,000 foot view, you're like, I'm not stupid. I'm not terrible. I'm not crazy. This was never going to work.
Yes.
If you actually use just a small bit of logic, right?
Yes.
Remove the emotion.
Yep.
Remove all the what you're feeling and just look at facts, right? And carve out the truth. And I think when you look at just the truth, and this is a season that I'm in right now.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this with some relationships. Like, what is the truth amongst the relationship, right?
Yeah.
Like, did I show up or did I not?
Yeah.
Did I check in? Am I, on top of it? Am I, putting in the energy and the effort to build the relationship? Or am I trying and getting nothing back? Or am I trying and it's one-sided? So I'm in a season right now where there's some relationships I'm trying to analyze in that way. But to bounce back to that company, it was like, okay, the truth is, this is insane. I'm working 130 hours a week. I'm drinking alcohol to cope with it.
Yep.
I moved to Nashville. I don't know anyone. I've been living here for a year and a half.
Yep.
Like, all I've seen is Broadway because my office was right next to it.
Right.
Getting drunk right after. Like, I haven't even gone on hikes. I love hikes. It was one of the reasons why I was excited about Tennessee. All these things come into play, and I start to realize that, wow, no one's going to succeed at this.
That's right.
And then I start to ask questions before I make analysis or assumptions, and I realize the last 5 people didn't succeed. The last 5 people lasted a year, and I'm a year and a half in. And then I went to 2 years, and then I'm like, oh, finally I realize it, and I trust the reality and the truth that I'm seeing.
Yes.
So in those situations, what I've learned is, how do you get out of it? How do you get the help? How do you? So share your experience, because I know you. This is me just rambling and bambling with my scenarios, but I know you've really done a lot of work around this.
Yeah. So let me just say to you, you're doing a lot of very, very good things. It is clear to me based on what you've said. Even though my story is quite different than yours, there's a lot of parallels. Blaming yourself, turning to addictive substances, just the mind games you play with yourself, sleepless nights, whatever,
Ooh, yep.
And so the first thing I would say to you or anyone listening to this is, like, stop blaming yourself. Okay, that's the first thing.
How do you stop blaming yourself?
It takes a lot of work, and I'll get to that.
Okay.
I promise I will get to that. But the first piece of the healing that relates to that is, you can't change anyone. All right? Again, back to the addiction thing, one of the things that I love to talk about to whoever's listening is, this is from AA, and they always say that an alcoholic will stop when it is more painful to keep drinking than to stop. Okay? So you can't change anyone. You can only change yourself. So understand that, first of all. And then start to repair yourself and start to think about, how can I influence this situation and or this person? So then you've got agency, right? You've got something to do. You've got a way to do it. Rather than just turning the bottle or turning to the doom scrolling or turning to the Netflix or whatever is your jam, take action. Take some action to improve yourself. And here's where you're going to get into kind of different kind of prescriptive treatments, and I'll talk about what I did. My first step was, I had to get control of my tongue. I had a lot of anger, and I was just spouting off whatever to whoever. And I was really trying to force the world to understand me. The world doesn't care. The world doesn't care about any one individual. So now we go back to tactical empathy. If you can get your words under control, and it's not easy, and there's a ton of YouTube coaches out there and a ton of, analog real world coaches you can work with, which I did as well, that can train you in a lot of techniques. Understanding multiple perspectives, understanding sources of truth. And I had gone through a process to really, really understand what is this person's truth, what is my truth. And truth has a couple different components. There's subjective truth, there's objective truth, there's complex truth. And I would journal. I would write it down. I have to get it out of my body. I think in my head, but I'm prone to action. So if I can get those thoughts out on paper, process it, and then enter the world, enter the room with the narcissist or the high conflict individual or the whatever, that was a huge part in me understanding and moving forward.
Wow. That's so right. Those situations, all I did was talk shit.
Yeah.
And I look back at myself and I'm like, I was talking so much trash.
Yeah.
And it was because I was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I was angry.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to control it.
Yeah.
And I don't act like that. That's not a core
No,
value
that's not
of
you.
mine. That's I joke and I'll mess around and I'll say something stupid, but it's not a inflection point of pain that I'm trying to cause. It's more of a social back and forth and with the right people. But in that period of time for me, I was spouting off all the things.
Yeah.
And judging and wow. Yeah. I never thought of it like that. I missed that point in my own healing. Yeah. I was aware of it, but I never focused on it.
Well, and everybody's healing is a little bit different. I will, take a little detour and talk about anger here, because growing up, my parents, you need to be nice. You need to be, I had sort of had the anger sort of pushed out of me. And so as an adult, I had this kind of incomplete, really obscure way of coping with anger. And where I'm at now with it, and again, there's good days and bad days. So, I'm far from perfect on this, but just sort of letting the anger flow through you because it's an important emotion and you shouldn't suppress it. If you suppress it, then it blows up and you don't want that. So if you can somehow harness the anger for passion, if you can harness it for impact even, that's a really, really positive thing. The way that I kind of look at it now is, again, I look at a lot of things, one from a place of curiosity and two from a place of unlearning and learning. And so just taking the situation, breaking it down to its component parts, and then building it back up in a more positive way. Okay, I got this problem yesterday, all right? The problem components are A, B, C. What can I do different about A and B and C? And then putting that back in your body and then going out in the world. But it takes time. It takes time.
I love the fact that you talk about and just brought up you have to feel through it.
Yeah.
Because I've tried it the other way.
Yeah.
I've bottled it up and you explode.
You explode.
Like you explode. And if you just feel it and know that you're in it and you're in that fear or that frustration or that anger, and then you come out of it for a second, you realize I'm not dead.
Yeah.
I'm still alive. I now have control because I've just let it get out of me a little bit. I feel like I have a little bit more control. And what do I do now? Now that I've felt it and I've gone through it, okay, now what? What's the action? What's the steps? And I think that's really powerful to identify, become aware, and move through it to the other side.
Yeah. There's also an interesting thing here, which is, and I have to give a shout out again to a couple of prominent YouTube folks, Richard Reeves and Scott Galloway. They talk a lot about males, and in particular young males. And I can tell you by my experience, I'm guessing yours might be similar, we're not trained in this stuff. We're trained to be bold and aggressive and physical. And so showing up and yelling and getting angry, these are not exactly productive things to do for society. I didn't have any good controlled anger role models growing up. And I've had to find them in my adult and mid to late adult life. But again, it requires a lot of, honestly, I think if there was a neuroscientist listening to me, they would say it takes a lot of brain training, rewiring that circuitry in your brain away from yelling and anger and into something more productive and empathetic. Totally. So again, unlearning and learning, it all comes back to that.
How are you unlearning? Are you writing down and journaling and then kind of going through it and saying, okay, what do I like? Let's put it in the box. What do I want to pull out of the box?
Yep.
And kind of recrafting. So you're reflecting a lot.
Reflecting a ton. And what I like to do is, again, I'm a big journaler. So I like to journal, not every day, but most days. I also try to do exercises within the journaling. Sometimes there's a place for what I like to call mental diarrhea, but for me, it's more effective when I can follow a particular structure. And there's all kinds of different structures you can follow. The Cartman triangle, for example, is one that I like a lot, where you identify people per triangle of a relationship where there's a persecutor, there's a victim, and a rescuer. And I constantly fall into the rescuer mode. I'm always trying to rescue all the people in my life. Really good intention doesn't always get me what I want. So that's one way that I look at it. Another thing, honestly, and this has always been a big part of my life, but I've kind of refound it in the last 6 months or so, is a walk. All right? It just getting yourself out and just moving and letting blood flow and brain cells reform and getting oxygen in. We're animals. All right. And we are so separated from the fact that we are animals. But lean into your animal and do something with your body. That helps me. Another crazy thing that someone taught me to do, which is really crazy, but it works for me, is Bottles of essential oil. And you're having a bad moment, I like lemons and oranges. Newsflash. Just take a whiff of a little bit of lemon or a little bit of orange, and it totally just gets you out of the headspace you're in and into a different headspace. Might not be the exact headspace you need to go to, but it stops. It stops your negative thinking, and it just opens up your brain to a possible reframe.
I was having coffee the other day with a good friend of mine, and he's kind of in a mode where he's stuck a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, what the fuck happened? Like,
Yeah.
why am I, like, what happened to me? I never was like this. Like, well, this and that. And I was trying to tell him that you can't have a negative and a positive thought at the same time. And how do you replace some of this stuff? And it starts with identification and analysis of where it's coming from. And we kind of went down that path. But I love the uniqueness around the essential oils because all it is a different sense. So if you're struggling to change your brainwave or your pattern by using your brain and your pattern, well, that might not work. There might be that complexity because you're in the same category. But by taking a scent of something, and just now I'm thinking about, like, when you said it, I was thinking about beautiful oranges,
Exactly.
like, falling from the sky, right?
Yeah.
Like when you said that, I'm thinking, literally, I've got a picturesque memory, but I'm like, oh, these are beautiful oranges falling from the sky, and it's sunny out, and like, you just changed my brain thought. I like the uniqueness of that because you're bringing in different senses. You're bringing in something that's not in that same category of, Jim, just go from negative to positive.
Right.
Like, you could say that, and I said that, and it didn't work, right?
Yep.
When I said that to him, it didn't work.
Yeah.
And I was well enough, I read the body language, and I realized that it didn't sit well. But now I feel like I have to share that with him. Of like,
Absolutely.
is that, I don't know, a cologne? Is that an essential oil? Is that, maybe you close your eyes and you're not seeing an image. For me, what I do when I'm really stressed out and like I can feel the blood pressure rise, I don't know if this is normal, but like I can literally feel it in my body.
Yes.
I can feel it come up.
Also
and
me.
The pressure.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of odd if I explain it because you're gonna be like, what? It's kind of like I feel like it goes through my blood.
Yeah.
But when that's happening, how do I get myself out of that state? Well, I've identified it first. But for me, I close my eyes and I think about the farthest away sound that I can hear.
Yes.
And it's not a positive, it's not a negative to a positive, but what it typically is, it's typically life that I hear.
Yeah.
A bird chirping.
Yep.
I'm in the city. You don't really hear that when you're not paying attention.
Right.
You hear the truck go by and the highway and the horn or someone slamming a door or a conversation down the road. And in that moment, it's just, it snaps me out of it.
Yes.
So for me, it's auditory essentially, right?
Right.
For you, it's scent.
Yeah.
So that's, wow. Thanks for sharing that.
No.
I never made those connections ever.
But it's great.
And I'm over here trying to help a friend, and now I got something that I can bring them.
No, absolutely. And here's the thing too.
That.
It's senses. It's senses. We are animals. Underneath all that really complicated stuff, we're animals, right? And animals have senses.
Yeah.
And they use their senses way more than we do. I want to comment on this thing about the body and the way you feel the blood pressure building up. Again, you are listening to yourself. And so many of us, and me for a long time, I was sort of dead to my body's sensations. And this was happening, and I had lost the ability somehow to feel that. And when you can feel that coming on, you can start to self-talk yourself out of it. Because if you've got a anger eruption brewing or whatever the problem is, use that as a symbol that, oh, this is coming. And, grab your oils, listen for your sounds, take a deep breath, go for a walk, whatever. You can walk away from a situation and come back fresh and be better able to manage it. But running around and yelling at people and snapping at people and over-explaining things and talking too much, this does nobody any good, ever. And in that sense, empathy becomes a direct pathway, again, if used tactically, to leadership.
Totally.
And the best leaders know how to listen to their bodies and control it. I've been doing a lot of work lately with caffeine and sleep. And caffeine is probably the drug that I'm least able to get rid of. I love coffee. And the ritual of a cup of coffee, again, another way to smell it, feel the heat, to reprogram your brain and reapproach a situation. But coffee has a downside. It can overstimulate you. And there's an interesting study that was done where they looked at chief executives. What are the top traits of chief executives? And kind of near the top was they understand their relationship with caffeine very well. When they can use it, when they can't use it. So you got to be careful with some of these things.
You brought up the fact that you were numb at one point.
Yeah.
And I went through that as well. A lot of alcohol use, I was in this narcissistic business relationship. And wow, now I'm putting it all together. This was all around the same exact time.
Yeah.
And I remember because my wife's chiropractor, functional medicine,
yeah,
vitamins. She does muscle testing, allergy testing, right? And when she first was like, "Hey," because I was taking vitamins, I was I knew that I should. I know I'm not getting all my veggies, whatever.
It's a good thing,
but I was like, these don't do anything.
Yeah.
And then when it started at the same time, drinking stops.
Yep.
And then the vitamins change and they actually have an impact and they're starting to work and I'm starting to feel it. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
This is just so different.
Yes.
For you, was it substance that caused that numbing? Or was it emotions? Like why do you think you might not have felt your body as much as you did in the past? For me specifically, I know that it was high level of stress and alcohol because I just didn't want to deal with anything.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have fun and be around people and do the fun things.
Yeah.
So it was suppression of not addressing the negative emotions.
Yeah.
That caused me to numb.
For me, it was too. And what's actually kind of being very honest here, if I look back on my life, in some ways I could look at it a series of addictions from one to the other, and they keep switching, and they keep shape-shifting, and they keep changing.
Full body goosebumps when you said that.
Yeah.
Great reflection.
And as I'm just sitting here, okay, well, I've already mentioned caffeine. I've already mentioned alcohol, books, travel, work. You name it. I don't know if I have an addictive personality, but I don't have to do anything. As anyone who's ever met me will tell you, I go very, very deep. I always want to be an expert. I always want to be a specialist on things. And while that's a very, very positive intention, boy, there can be a downside. So just as I was talking about with caffeine, just approach these things, especially if it's a substance, especially if it's a vitamin, especially if it's something you're doing with your body. Also, the relationships in your life. If it's something that gets into that addiction circuitry, watch out, because you're not rational inside your body. Your body's looking for the next hit. And actually learning to get the addiction out of your body is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Now, I'm fortunate in the sense that some of my addictions haven't been physical. Eating everything at Panera, okay, for example, it probably will kill you, but it probably will kill you slower than alcohol or nicotine. You know what I mean? So,
Yep.
Whatever it is, but breaking that addiction cycle and learning to just enjoy, something bit by bit is okay. But you got to be really careful if you're prone to addiction, as I am. I think we all are.
And I think that the reflection piece is so important to understand utilization of anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you're not reflecting, how do you know, am I abusing something or not?
Yes.
Right? And for me, a lot of it was I didn't want to reflect because I knew the answer. And I didn't want to go down to the data, talking to the data guy.
Yes.
I didn't want to go down to the data because I knew what the data would tell me. And then I couldn't unlearn it. I'm like, I know it's real. It's proof is in the pudding. The sources are good. The data is good, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to face it and attack it. And I think that takes a lot of growth. And to your point, you get out of one and you don't even realize the other one.
Yeah.
When I stopped drinking, I started smoking a ton of cannabis.
There you go.
Like, and then I'm like, what am I doing?
Right.
I'll use cannabis in the evenings or, whatever, and mellow down. But like I was smoking a lot.
Yeah.
And it was, the beauty was, oh, okay. Oh, 2 weeks later, I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it didn't come to that point until I started talking about it in writing, getting it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what am I doing? This is not me. So and then I jumped to working out.
Yes.
And it was, I
Yes.
have to wake up at 3:45.
That's early.
That's early, and power to people. But like now I wake up at 5, and
Yeah.
and I'm getting my 7.5 hours, and I'm feeling good and in health, right? So like I start to recognize these changes, and then I have to pull back and go, okay, what does this look like in moderation?
Yes.
Is the alcohol for me? Don't want to go back to it.
Right.
I'll never drink again, probably. It was a great phase. It worked until it didn't.
Yes.
We talked about it.
Yes.
We talked about it earlier, right? I think other things can happen in moderation. Other things can happen in certain instances or cases, but a majority of those things aren't good.
No.
Even in moderation.
No.
Right? Having the cheeseburger from McDonald's or the Big Mac, okay, not the biggest deal in the world. Like you said, it's not going to kill you today. But knowing that you do that every Thursday and Friday, that's an addiction that's probably not good.
Right. It's interesting, too, back to the data. There's a fine line between an addiction and being curious, even obsessed about something, especially at first. Right now, shout out Aura Ring. Everybody who's in my life right now is hearing me profess Aura Rings. I thought, on top of all of the problems that I knew I had in my life, I thought I was a good sleeper. I, generally speaking, have always gotten 7-ish hours a night for a very, very long time. And then Santa Claus got me a Aura Ring, and it turns out I'm a lousy sleeper. I'm waking up a lot. I didn't know it. But now I've got the data. And it was until I had the data and saw, oh, wow, these sleep patterns are not encouraging, that I really had to assess how I'm sleeping. And there's the caffeine story again. A lot of what I've had to deal with in terms of stress, I need to get stress out of my body, and I need to do that at night. I was always a morning journaler. Now I'm having to experiment with evening journaling. So once you find out you have a problem and you've got some kind of objective way of looking at it, an objective way of getting data about it, then coming up with a plan to get better about it, you're going to go through an obsessive piece, an obsessive time, and it can flip over to an addiction if you're not careful. We've talked about the sauna.
Yeah.
I'm a huge sauna user. And again, when I first started doing that and I started realizing the changes in my body, I went all in, and I got data and Dr. YouTube and the whole bit. And now it's just kind of a few times a week kind of a thing. And it's great. I love it, but I managed to not let that one get over the hurdle into full-blown addiction. And
Totally.
It's a challenge. So.
All right, last question for you before we wrap up.
Okay.
What legacy do you want to leave?
What legacy do I want to leave? Big question. I guess the only legacy I would ever want to leave relates again to empathy. Understand other people, enjoy other people. We are wired and our species evolved to be social creatures. Even if you're an introvert, you need other people. You will not be happy if you don't have friendship, if you don't have family, if you don't have people around you. So first and foremost, do that. In a business sense, though, it's the same thing, but just use those relationships for the greater good of whatever organization you're affiliated with, and making them, if it's money, if it's making people's lives better, if it's spreading gospel, whatever it is, put those skills to use for the greater good. And That's all any of us can do, in my view.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Rob, for being here. Thank you for those listening. You can find Rob on LinkedIn. He's teaching a class coming up at Michigan
Michigan State.
Michigan State. And we'll see you on the next episode.